Okay, everyone, we need to get started with this session, The Value of Green. I realize you're having good table conversations, but I've been told about 5 minutes ago that the other sessions have already started and we need to move on quickly. What I'm going to do is introduce the two speakers that will be presenting this, and then they will just be on their own after that. We're going to start today with Johannes Hailu, PhD. He's a visiting assistant professor and research coordinator with the Land Policy Institute at Michigan State University. Johannes coordinates the land use and natural resource valuation research and undertakes econometric, new word for me, modeling and analysis for the Hanna Professor in Land Policy at Michigan State University's Land Policy Institute. He holds a Bachelor of Arts in Economics and Finance from the University of Asmara, Eritrea. I hope I pronounced that right. That's in Africa. As well as a Master of Science in Agricultural and Resource Economics, both from West Virginia, got Michigan on the brain, University. Following Johannes will be Elaine Starrett-Isley, who JD, which I found out means she has a law degree. And Elaine sits with me on the Land Use Leadership Council, and she's just a wonderful asset to our organization. Land use, what am I in? Green infrastructure leadership. Boy, I see what happens when I eat lunch. Okay, she is an adjunct research associate from the Annis Water Resources Institute at Grand Valley State University at the Robert B. Annis Water Resources Institute in Muskegon, Michigan. She's a member of the West Michigan Strategic Alliance Green Infrastructure Leadership Council, which I just said. She is currently the project manager and co-principal investigator for an integrated assessment project evaluating stormwater management and control alternatives in the village of Spring Lake and Spring Lake Township in Ottawa County. She was also the project manager for the recently concluded economic valuation of ecosystem services in West Michigan. Ms. Isley is a former Great Lakes Commission Sea Grant Fellow. She is a licensed attorney and a former litigator. In addition to her JD, Ms. Isley also holds an MS in biology with an emphasis in natural resource management and a BS in finance. And so to start with, welcome Johannes.
Thank you. Usually the way it starts, pronouncing my name becomes very difficult. But today, apparently, West Virginia and econometrics is much more harder to pronounce than my name, so I think that's a good start. I'm fine. All right. Thank you again for the introduction. I think in the past, I've been to some other conferences, and usually, on the one hand, you have people who are devotedly focused on conservation and to the extent where the role of economics is not recognized. And on the other hand, you have economists who tend to believe that the market is a solution. So if you have a farmland preservation problem and other conservation-related problems, the market has a tendency and ability to take care of it, so it's not a problem. So you have these two views that has been going on for some time. But in the last years, and particularly today, I'm very happy to notice that economics and conservation doesn't necessarily have to conflict with each other. We can actually utilize them to advance our economic opportunities at the same time by protecting our resources. All right. My presentation, I'll be presenting actually the work that was done at the Land Policy Institute. There is a team working on conservation research and land use policy type of research. So some part of my presentation would actually reflect that. And Dr. Soja Adelaja, he spoke this morning. He's a team leader and the research leader providing a lot of intellectual inputs and leadership in this project. And we have Mirabet Lake, myself, Chuck, and other people actually contributing towards this project. All right, since I have 30 minutes, I'll be really going pretty fast through my slides. And my presentation would focus first, what is the link between green infrastructure and the economy? It has been repeatedly discussed today, but briefly, just to put some perspective, I'll try to show what is really the connection between green infrastructure and local economy. Then I'll jump straight to some valuation methods that have been applied to attach monetary value to resources. This would be very important because unless we know what the value of our resources are, it becomes very difficult actually to plan and conserve them or utilize them effectively. So I'll briefly go through that. And then I'll jump straight to some applications, some studies that has been conducted in Michigan communities here in terms of valuing their resources and what the value of their green infrastructure is. And finally, I think I go to some policy implications. All right, LPI, or Land Policy Institute, has been very effective in this way. What we try to do is really go to local communities and listen what are the problems at the local level, be it on the conservation side or on the economy side, and then try to really provide a science-based research and analysis to support local decision-making, hopefully effective decision-making. And our goal is really to expand beyond Michigan as a center for land policy research and conservation research, and we have been working to go in that direction. So that's what we are, and that's where we want to go. Okay, coming to the main point, I think this morning a number of speakers, Soji, Steve, Barbara, and Tom Daniels, repeatedly informed us that there is a critical link between green infrastructure and your local economy, and it has been increasingly becoming so. So globally, there is competition across countries, but what is more interesting now is there is competition even across communities for jobs, for people, for tax base. So in this very, very competitive environment, how can local economists really strive for sustainability and economic prosperity in the coming decades? It has become very, very important. And two things that has really come out is what's called a knowledge-based economy and green infrastructure-based economy are very, very critical in this effort. And there has been a lot of studies that showed there exists a critical link between green infrastructure and economic prosperity. And the way it works is, let's say you have a given quality and quantity of green assets. Those directly impact population growth and employment growth, simply because people in today's economy would like to live in locations that have high amenity value. And we know that wherever people want to go, jobs would also follow them. Therefore, amenities are critically linked to our population growth and employment growth. They are also critically related to local property values, which affects, of course, property tax collections. They directly impact our quality of life, and they also define our sense of community and sense of how tied we are. Partly depends on, among other things, on the kind of and quality of resources we have at the local level. So if you tie all these things together, they directly or indirectly impact your local economy. So that's why it is repeatedly emphasized that green infrastructure discussion is really at the center of economic prosperity discussion at the same time. So coming to the main topic again, why is it then important to understand the ways for us to value our green infrastructure? Why is it important to value them in the first place? All right. So I'm sure you can give me so many reasons, but at least two of them are: one, if we understand what the value of our green infrastructure locally are, then we are in a better position to plan for them, to conserve them. Once we know how valuable something is, we have a tendency to plan for effectively preserving them. But most importantly, once we know what the economic value of our local resources or green assets are, then we can design different economic policies to leverage them to bring regional and local economic prosperity. So from those two perspectives, it's really critical. But the question is, what do we mean by the value of green infrastructure? what are we really trying to value? Is that the scenic value? Is that the quality of life aspect of it? What do we really mean when we say the value or the monetary value of local green infrastructure is a very critical issue. So to inform on that, just consider this. Let's say you have the total resource value. Let's put everything in terms of monetary concept and say the total monetary value of your local green infrastructure, your trails, amenity value of water, and so on and so forth, let's say it's this much. Then you can decompose that into two. You value it because you directly use it. For example, you can go down, walk on your trail, you can canoe on your waterways, and so on and so forth. Because you directly utilize them, you might attach value to them. But value can also be derived from non-use values. We don't have to really use the resources to value them. So if you focus on non-use value, we can value resources simply because they exist. For example, historic buildings and historic sites, we attach a lot of value to them simply because they exist, so they have existence value. They also have value, what's called bequest value and option value, which is we value resources not necessarily because we utilize them currently, because we care about the next generation and their ability to utilize and consume the flow of services from these resources as we are able and fortunate to consume today. So it's very, very important as we talk about the value of green infrastructure for us to know about what exactly are we trying to value. Is that the value for the next generation? The value for our own consumption? The value simply because they exist, or the total valuation? So that aspect is very important as we indulge in terms of the economic valuation of our local resources. Okay, coming purely to economics now, there are a lot of methodologies out there that would enable us to attach monetary value to green infrastructure, or what are called green assets. Some of them are based on market evaluation because there is market information, and a typical application of this has been economic impact assessment. What is the economic impact of having a park, a state park? What is the economic impact of fishing access, and so on and so forth? Since there is direct market information, we can go ahead and utilize that to attach monetary value. But sometimes it can get more difficult because we have, for example, what is the value of a given forest? Forest is not traded in the free market. There is no market information to help us attach value to this kind of resources. In this case, we utilize what are called indirect methods to elicit value for green assets, including hedonic pricing, defensive expenditure, travel cost, and contingent valuation. I don't want to go too deep into the technical aspect of that, but briefly, I'll walk through them just to highlight some of the topics. In terms of economic impact analysis, let's say you have a green infrastructure. Can I pull this out? Let's say you have, a given green infrastructure, and since you have that green infrastructure, a lot of visitors would be interested to come to your location to live there, or to visit you, or for any other purpose, just to have recreational access. It could be fishing activity, it could be hunting, whatever it is. The higher local amenities you have, people will be interested to come and visit your community. What would that do? When people visit you, usually they spend their money, and they spend their money on hotel, motel, food and groceries, gas, fees and licenses, and so on and so forth. That creates jobs, that creates income in the local economy in all these industries. And this combined impact we call local economy impact of having a given green asset or green infrastructure. So this way you can attach value to the services of what we call amenities. Let me skip through advantage and disadvantage. I hope some of the slides would get posted on the website. But for the sake of time, I would go to the next one. This one is hedonic valuation. In hedonic valuation, what happens is the market doesn't help us to attach value to our resources, local resources. In this case, we try to extract value indirectly. One way to do that is, let's say you have property value, right? Some part of that property value is determined by housing structure. How many rooms we have, what is the lot size, what is the building style, when it is built. All those housing structure contributes obviously towards its value. Another one is neighborhood characteristics. What's the crime rate, racial composition, and so on and so forth. All these things also contribute to the property value. But there is a third aspect, which is green asset or green infrastructure also contribute to housing value. Because if your property is located to a very, very beautiful and pristine area, the value of your property is going to radically jump up. Therefore, hedonic analysis, what it enables us, is really decompose the total value and segment from property value the value that's only attached to green infrastructure. In that way, we attach some value. I'll give you some applications of that. There is also what's called defensive expenditure type of methodology. In this case, what happens is the resource is degraded. For whatever reason, we haven't taken an action in advance. So we have problems associated with green infrastructure, not value. We have losses. It could be groundwater contamination. It was mentioned this morning. It could be deforestation that creates flooding problem. It could be air pollution. It could be invasive species. In each of these cases, what happens is to protect our communities from these problems, we spend defensively. That is, we spend on purifying our groundwater quality, we spend on flood damage control, and so on and so forth. So by observing how we spend money to defend ourselves from the negative impact or from mismanagement of our green assets, we can attach value. What's the value of the opposite? Instead of now, what's the value of groundwater contamination, we talk about what's the value of clean water, and so on and so forth. So one methodology out there. Let me pass this one and talk about contingent valuation method. In contingent valuation, this is the extreme case of valuation in my view, because there is no market, there is no indirect imputation of value. Let's say, for example, what is the value to local community from forest fire protection? There's no market for that. There is no implied valuation for that. In that case, what we do is we go to the extreme. We ask people directly, how much are you willing to pay if you protect forest fire? Then you say, well, I'm willing to contribute per year $500 for forest protection. That directly shows us your valuation for forest fire in the absence of any market, in the absence of any information that we can lean on to indirectly collect value. So these are all what we call valuations that are out there. I know I've gone through them very, very briefly, and the techniques and methodologies could get involved, but these are tools out there if you are interested to attach monetary value to your local green assets. That's not me. All right. All right, so applications. We have done some studies in the local economies here in Michigan, trying to apply some of these methodologies to help local communities attach value to their resources so that they are aware of what kind of assets they have, the value of assets they have, and how they can really plan for their prosperity based on green infrastructure. It has been repeatedly discussed this morning. And the first application we have is Rifle River Recreational Area in Ogemaw County. And the recreational area is about 4,450 acres. And there are approximately 72,000 visitors or campers to that particular recreational area. So the interest to that county was, what is the economic value of recreational parks in that county? So Land Policy Institute conducted a study to measure the economic impact to local economy, and these are some of the results we have. The direct economic impact is valued at $1,300,000 per year. The indirect economic impact is about $419,000 because of what are called backward and forward linkage. If you convert that per acre, that's almost $300 per acre of that recreational service contributing to the local economy per annum or per year. So to put that in perspective, if the total direct and indirect economic impact of that recreational area in Ogemo County is $393, and in Michigan there are 285,000 acres of state land or state park, then if we assume all parks are almost similar in quality and accessibility, like the one in Ogemo County, then we're talking about approximately $112 million of economic contribution of a green asset that is only state parks. We still have trails, we still have a lot of things that we didn't value, but only out of state parks, the estimated annual economic impact is quite substantial. So this is why green assets, as you talk about them, they have a significant contribution and impact to local economies in Michigan. Well, another application we did is in two different counties. One is in Hillsdale County, the other one is in Oakland County. So in Hillsdale County, we are attaching monetary value, or we are valuing what are called water amenities. What's the value of water, or water-based amenities? And in Oakland County, we have valuation for trails, waterways, water bodies, and recreational lands, all sorts of green assets at the local level. And our results indicate that for Hillsdale County, this is the percentage of property value appreciation if you are located within 15 meters of water amenity. Property value on average jumps by almost 82%. And if you are a little bit farther away, the impact decays, but still you have a significant monetary improvement in the value of your property. So indirectly what we are saying is that is by how much property values are appreciating as a result of green assets, and your local property-based tax income is also going to increase because of the indirect contribution of green assets at the local level. In Oakland County, I'll just go straight to the results. What we have is, this one is for water amenity. Again, property values jump by an estimated 21%, or close to $55,000. For recreational land, property values jump by a maximum of, I think, 3.2%. That's close to $8,000 at a given distance or at a given location. Trails valuation. Trails contribute on average to, in Oakland County, at a given distance, 6.3% of property values, as estimated at $16,000 per property. And waterways contribute an upward of 2.2%, that's estimated at $5,600 value contribution to properties because of local green assets. Right. So from this, what we understand is, as we talk about the link between green assets and local economies, the connection is very clear and the connection is very substantial. So we have to effectively and wisely utilize our green assets to bring needed local economic growth in a balanced and smart way. So then we shifted our attention at the Land Policy Institute to ask ourselves, if we know already what kind of impact green assets have to local economies, is the state doing enough to protect them and to conserve them? So that took us to a different research. So we developed what's called a gap analysis. To conduct that, we went nationwide. We compared Michigan across all the states, the lower 50 in the United States. So this is the total nationwide ranking comparing Michigan with the rest of the nation in terms of these resources. So as you can see, Michigan ranks among the top 10 and the top first in many of these resources that we have. So there is no doubt Michigan is well endowed with green assets at the local level, even if you compare it nationwide. All right? However, the question is, are we spending enough, or are we investing enough in protecting and conserving our local assets that have a substantial economic value? So to conduct that, we developed a model. So that model, what it captures is, let's say you have conservation spending, and the way states spend on conservation depends at least on 4 factors, broader factors. One, it depends on socioeconomic characteristics, like what is your taxing ability, what is the wealth of the state, so many socioeconomic parameters, what is the awareness level or the educational attainment regarding your awareness towards the environment, and so on and so forth. But it also depends on your natural resource base, which is how much and what's the quality of resource you have, determines how much you spend in terms of protecting them. At least that's what we think. And you have some state-specific characteristics defining the difference across states, what makes what state different from the other. And you have some political factors, because we found out that politics is a critical aspect when you talk about conservation spending. How much is spent critically depends on the structure and nature of your political system, your upper and lower house. So based on this, we developed this particular model, which I'm going to skip quite quickly. And this is what we found out. So the straight line simply talks about what each state is expected to spend, given its political, economic, taxing ability, all those characteristics I just briefly discussed. And this is, the zigzag line shows what is actually spent. So zooming into Michigan, this is what Michigan was expected to spend per person or per capita, and this is what Michigan is actually spending. So to give you that perspective, just look at this. This is total ranking based on the model of states that are investing. So green means investing in green assets, and red means states that are really underspending or under-conserving, under-providing state resources for conservation activity. And unfortunately, Michigan is here. Michigan is the largest per-person gap. So this is like almost $3.2 per person underspending on conservation, would translate to, with almost 10 million something Michigan population, approximately to $32 million underspending on green assets. So then we ask another question: what can Michigan do to close that gap? And not only to close that gap, to be competitive nationwide, what kind of scenarios are we looking at? And the results suggest for Michigan to close the current gap in conservation spending or in green asset investment, we need an upward of $32 million every year increase just to close the gap. If we desire Michigan to be the third tier or the third best states in investment, that requires another $42 to $47 million, and so on and so forth. And for Michigan to join the top tier 1% states in the nation that do critically invest on green assets, that would annually require between $52 and $82 million. All right. So based on this, I come to my conclusion. In general, as has been critically discussed also this morning, the discussion of green assets in relation to economics is very important, and it looks like that's where the future is going to go, and that's what's going to define our sustainability and future opportunities. And we have also seen from our different studies that green assets significantly contribute to local economies and impact economic activities. However, we have also seen that conservation spending or resource commitment at the state level falls much shorter, and that places us one of the last conservation spending states in the nation per person. So from this, I'll leave you with this conclusion that the success of Michigan in effectively utilizing and protecting its green assets will determine the pattern of our future growth and our sustainability. Thank you.
Okay. Unlike everyone else, I'm going to have to work from my laptop over here, so give me just a sec. There we go. All right, what I'm actually going to talk about here is we're going to talk about the specific project that we worked on at Grand Valley through the Water Resources Institute in partnership with the West Michigan Strategic Alliance. This is the economic valuation of ecosystem services in West Michigan. Was the project manager for this. Al Steinman at the Institute was the principal investigator. We worked with a group of people from Grand Valley, from Michigan State, and from IRN Incorporated. So we had a pretty big project team which included economists, GIS specialists, policy individuals, and ecologists. Very briefly, the EcoVal project is our slang for it, the economic valuation, it's EcoVal, is a subcomponent of a Green Infrastructure Initiative project looking at green infrastructure assets in the region. This is one of the next steps to the Leadership Council's final report and Natural Connections map. And that's a copy of the cover of the Natural Connections map, and we actually have updated Natural Connections maps which were printed by the Institute this week, which include 2 counties which were not part of the original assessment, which would be Ionia and Barry. Our initial project goals were to generate preliminary monetary value estimates of ecosystem services in the region. One of our main functions was to look at where is the data, what is unavailable. So we're also looking at data gaps. And then we've combined all this to put this onto the website for you so that it can be navigated and used by local decision makers and the public. The reason that we took this on is because this region is seeing rapid land use change. Regionally in the 7 counties, which include Ottawa, Kent, Barry, Ionia, Newaygo, Muskegon. Did I get 7? Allegan. I'm like, who did I miss? Allegan. We're seeing rapid land growth. That region, population has increased since 2000, from 2000 to 2005 by about 5%. New housing has increased by 8%. So we're seeing this trend that's happening throughout the state and throughout the nation where we're getting more building than we are having a population increase. When you're looking at these land use changes, we're not looking at the value of the green infrastructure, at least not directly. And so what we did is we looked at this valuation information so that we can provide this information to our decision makers and get better decision making out of them. This is just our definition of green infrastructure, which you've heard over and over today. The examples that I wanted to highlight, we have dunes, grasslands, forests, and farms, which include cropland, which include orchards. We have specialty crops in the region, wetlands, lakes, rivers, and streams, the watersheds, the shorelines, and the riparian areas. Ecosystem services. You've heard that word a couple of times so far today. This is specifically what it is. It's generally the benefits that people obtain from natural systems. Okay? And what's important to hear from that is that it's the benefits to people. Whenever you're looking at economic valuation, it's the benefits to people. So this does not take into consideration the benefits to animals or the benefits to any other system. Ecosystem services can be provisioning services, which are goods, food production, raw materials. Those are market values or market functions. Water supply would be a non-market function. Right now we have no way to value that, or at least not that it would appear. Regulating services, erosion control, and water regulation looks at the regulation of the systems through the ecosystem. Cultural services, aesthetics, recreation. Those are our cultural, spiritual, other non-material benefits that we get from green. And then supporting services are the underlying systems: habitat, pollination, nutrient cycling, and waste assimilation. These that I have listed here are examples. Those are the ones that we valued in this project. This is not a complete list of ecosystem services, but this was the subset that we focused on. Johan spent a lot of time talking about economic valuation, and this is just really a restatement of what he said. The methodology that we used was called benefit transfer. That looked at studies that have been completed by other scientists, other economists, utilizing the methods that Johan discussed: the contingent valuation, the travel costs, hedonic modeling. We took those studies and then adapted them to West Michigan demographics, and we had looked at our natural features and we adjusted them in that way. Note that this was a preliminary effort on our part. This is not going to be perfect data because it didn't come from our region necessarily. There's a couple of exceptions to that. But we had to borrow from other places just because of the limits and constraints of this project. This just highlights how these different concepts fit together. Forest land is an example of one of our green infrastructure land uses. The ecosystem services that are associated with that include the raw materials, the timber, firewood, lumber, the aesthetic amenities, fish and wildlife habitat, nutrient cycling, recreation, water regulation, waste assimilation, erosion control, and pollination. Not all land uses have all of those ecosystem services associated. I selected forest because it actually has quite a few of them. But these are the different things that we would value to come up with an economic value for those different things. So timber, firewood, and lumber, there's a market value for. Under recreation, hunting, hiking, camping, wildlife viewing, there's market value for some of those, but there's not necessarily for wildlife viewing. Nutrient cycling, healthy, productive soils, clean air and water, and improved human health. Right there, we're talking about the non-market ecosystem services. Okay, we have developed the web tool. Now, it is not currently live. We are hoping that it will be live very soon, but we're waiting for an upgrade to our fiber optic cable. And so right now I can't let you, we can't navigate it, but I do have this in a web-based format, so we're going to go ahead and look at it. You'd go to the AWRI website, which is hosted off of Grand Valley's website, so gvsu.edu, WRI, to the director's office. It's the first project listed, Economic Valuation of Ecosystem Services, and we're going to go directly to the web tool, which is going to take a second. Okay, so when you go to the web tool, this is what you're going to come up and see. Here's the original project homepage. Gives you some examples of what some of the green infrastructure in the region, and then it has a little bit of a description about how the land use change is affecting us. I'm not going to read these pages to you. I'm just going to kind of introduce you to what's available here. We're going to jump right to the valuation page. The ecosystem services that we valued for this project for the 7-county region are worth $550 million per year. What this map shows you, if you look at the legend, the red colors, ecosystem services were valued at $10,000 per acre per year or more. And you can see there's very little of that in the region. Most of those are associated with our dunes. Orange has the different values of 2001 through 10,000. Most of that is public forest land or public parkland. The green, which is overwhelmingly part of this region, is $200 to $2,000 per acre per year. Blue, which represents most of our waterways, is $0 to $200 per year, and gray is our urban areas, which we did not specifically value. So we did not specifically look at urban parks, which obviously there is a value for those. We just did not have the ability to look at that for this particular project. Okay, I'm going to see if I can do this without having everyone glaze over. This is the underlying values per acre per year for that map. Okay? The different land uses have different values for the different ecosystem services. They range from $3 per acre per year, so for forest lands, fish and wildlife habitat, to over $62,000 per acre per year. And that's for our public dune lands. Now, there's a big difference, as you can see, between the public and the private lands, in particular for our dunes and our forests, and that's an access issue. Because of the data that we were able to find, those numbers were originally based on how many people are utilizing those. And there's obviously going to be more people utilizing public lands than there are going to be using private lands. So for each value, you're going to have a description. So we can click each one, and this gives you information. Okay, it tells you your land use. It tells you your ecosystem service. So if I can do this without knocking my table off. It talks about what the dollar value is, and it gives you a confidence level. This is food production for cropland. That's a market-based ecosystem service. So we actually got data from MSCO's Department of Agriculture. They collected this information. This gives you a rough idea of what our economists did to adjust that information to West Michigan. Obviously, for this particular ecosystem service, there wasn't a lot that they had to do. However, all of our values are going to be subject to certain limitations. Even though this information came from Michigan State, it was based on survey data that they got from farms, broken up into different regions. They didn't necessarily get a lot of responses from each region. So I think Newaygo County, the data we have for Newaygo County, is lumped in with everything from northern Michigan and the UP. So even though we're relatively confident in this and the state uses this information, it still doesn't necessarily accurately reflect the situation in our region. All right. Now, as you can also see on this table, we have several slots that don't have values in them. NEI is not enough information. The economists determined that that was an ecosystem service land use value that we wanted to find. But because of the methodology we used, we did not go out into the field and ask people information. We did not go collect economic data. We relied on studies that existed. There wasn't enough information to transfer it. That doesn't mean that there aren't studies out there that look at those things. They just may have been regarding mangrove swamps. It just may not have been comparable. In some cases, there just isn't a lot of data. One of the things that we found, like in particular for grass and shrublands and for forest lands, there's a lot of data out there looking at studies for really unique areas, wilderness areas in Idaho. But there's not a lot of information out there about your urban park. What's the value of an urban park? What's the value of just a normal tract of forest land? So that's one of the difficulties that we had in looking at this project. INS on this, several fields say INS. Our economists determined that even though there may be a value associated with those ecosystem services for that land use, it's probably insignificant. And so we didn't take the time to look at those. And then not applicable, we determined that this ecosystem service just doesn't make sense with this land use. We have this level of data for every county. Since we're in Ottawa County, we'll go ahead and click Ottawa County. Okay, so here's Ottawa County. You get a little bit better view of the red. Okay, but we're still mostly green in that $201 to $2,000 range. I want to point out a couple of things when we go down to the Ottawa County matrix is what we're calling these. If you pay attention to the values for the dune land, okay, that's a significant jump from the regional value, and I want to show you why. Obviously, we only have 3 counties that have dune lands. In Allegan County, we came up with a value of $2,288, and Muskegon County, $7,972. Why is there such a big jump in those values? Very simply, Ottawa County kept better data on how many people were coming to their parks. These are based on user numbers. This does not mean to imply that fewer people go to Saugatuck Dunes. That's just the data we had. So I wanted to highlight that for you so that you could see that in giving you these numbers, there's a lot of slop in them. But this is really the first time that this has been done for this region, is to trying to quantify some of these things for you. Not all of the values for each county are going to be different than the regional values. Again, that was one of the limitations we had. The things where you're going to see differences are the cropland and the orchard values for food production. There were differences across the board for aesthetic, amenity, and recreation. A lot of that, as I said, is based on user numbers, but the aesthetic amenity was often incorporated. It's combined here. You can see we combined aesthetic amenity and recreation for our parks, which is mostly what these are. We combined recreation, wildlife habitat for water. Just depended on the data that we were able to come up with. For each county and for the region, you can continue to scroll down. We have additional information which breaks down the land use and the acreage for you to see that. What we did here is this is the total value of the ecosystem services associated with that land use in the county, as opposed to what was in the matrix, which was simply a per acre per value. This is for all of the acres in the county. Are we tired of looking at the data yet?
We've been told to wrap up at 1:30, but I'll let you finish. But I'm just telling you, if people start coming in, just ignore them, because they need a break. So it is 1:30.
All right, then what I'll do, I have a couple more slides, and we'll go ahead and finish up. All right. I think I've hit most of our project challenges. You know, we're taking data from other places, and we're trying to fit it into West Michigan. Sometimes, in a couple of instances, we had data from West Michigan. An economist from Grand Valley, who's no longer there, did a study on hedonic values in forest land. So we had some good value for West Michigan. Sometimes we had to borrow data from Michigan. Saginaw Bay, for example, did a big wetland study. But in other cases, we were lucky if we had something in the country. About 25% of the matrices had NEI in the field. So there was a lot of data that we just couldn't get to. This really is a first step for us. We're hoping that this generates enough information, enough interest for people so that we can kind of take it to the next step. We really, really would like to get better value data for the region, but that's going to take a lot more time and a lot more money to do it the proper way. So I hope everyone takes a look at the website. We will announce it through a press release through the West Michigan Strategic Alliance, through Grand Valley. We will make sure that everyone knows when that's up and available. We're actually currently working right now to see if there's a way that we can get a temporary site at the downtown Grand Valley campus until we get our fiber optics straightened out in Muskegon. But hopefully we'll be up and running sooner than later. And that's really all I had to say. I appreciate that was a lot of information and a lot of details. Do I have time for one or two questions? Does anybody have one? Yes. We did not select every market or non-market potential benefit that we could get from every system. Shipping is going to have a lot of good market-based information, and since most of our region is not on the Great Lakes, we decided to focus on the most local data. And so it was just a matter of, okay, these are the things that people haven't looked at before. We put food production in because it is such a key component of our fruit ridge. We didn't want to ignore that. But shipping, it was just a conscious decision not to put that in. We didn't put in public health benefits of some of these ecosystem services, which was huge. And there's double counting problems with that. So there was a lot of different reasons that we didn't pick all of the specific ecosystem services. That was a limited list. It was just a first attempt to go for this. So certainly, I don't want anyone to think that this is a complete valuation of our region. Yes.
And you also didn't include ecosystem services list any impact the green system had on the environment as a whole, say on
when we started this project, we did want to look at climate change and atmosphere, and if we could put a value on that. That's one of the regulating services that we had identified. We put it as a second-tier ecosystem service for the simple reason is that it's kind of a global issue. There was no way for us to make a local value out of that with the time and resources that we had. And it was that simple. But you're right, that's a very important issue. And I don't mean to imply that if we didn't choose it, it's not important. That's certainly not the way that we came up to those. We just picked those because those seem to be the most relevant to the Green Infrastructure Initiative.
I think we better stop now. We're getting this.
Thank you.
Just for your information, there'll be a break, and you go to your next session. Be in there by 1:45. Thank you. Oh, we're in the hour. 10 minutes?
As you're coming back in, if you would remember to try to get the same keypad number that you had when you voted your demographics, that would be helpful. Well, we would record your conference evaluation under a different demographic category, because it's going to match to the keypad. Sometimes I like to not use demographics till the end, but we do a lot of different ways. Yeah. But now, in the evaluation, you change keypad numbers. No, if you did, what would happen is it would record the demographics attached to that key number and your votes now. Because they're going to be linked through the whole thing. I use option finder primarily. Right, right. There is a company that makes that is a company called Option Technologies. They also make a product called Option Power, which is actually integrated into PowerPoint. I use that sometimes, but the reason I don't use Option Power is like I said, it keeps me voting in Option Power. And I really believe in the power of paired voting and forced choice voting. Second is that the way they sell the software, Option Finder is I can use as many keypads as I want. Option Power, they license their software partners related to keypads. I own the keypads, so my license is complete. So a group like this, they would have to pay a license fee for using more than 50 keypads. And to me, that's just a flaw. Yeah. It makes it it's a very good relative ranking tool. And I use it a lot to do connected groups where they have created, we only have 15 pairs. We do a group that has 20 strategies, that's 190 pairs. And we never do a two-way comparison. The first time we do that one. And we ask them, the question then is, how important is this strategy relative to the other strategy that you feel vision? Then the second question we ask is, how, on a 1 to 9 scale, how well are they performing in this strategy compared to how well you perform? Topical 4-quadrant graph. And then you start to say, okay, these 3 strategies are really important in your future, and you're pretty good at it. So what you do when you have these 3 are really important, and you're not very good at it. And you got to put your attention there. So now instead of focusing on 20 strategies, you can focus on 3.
All right, we just have about 10 more minutes here. We're going to gather a little bit more information on how you perceived the day, and then there will be a couple closing remarks. So if you could pick up the keypad that you've been using throughout the day, we'll start the evaluation.
I was asked by someone, well, what happens if I pick up a different keypad? The answer is you'll become a different person. You may not know who that is, but the system will know who you are, where you live, how old you are, and what gender you are. So with that being said, we've got just a few quick questions. Again, multiple choice, very easy to use. How would you rate your overall satisfaction with today's event? 4 choices, very to not. And I'm going to have to remember when I evaluate these later. Oop, we just lost our questions. There we go. That 4 is the worst score, not the best score. Otherwise, I'll be disappointed. Your satisfaction with the morning speakers. We have 71 people still here. Your satisfaction with the afternoon breakout sessions. There were adequate opportunities for discussion of the information presented at today's conference. There were adequate opportunities for networking at today's conference. I would recommend this event to a colleague. This is an annual event. And finally, based on what I saw here today, the West Michigan Strategic Alliance's land use work is responsive to the concerns of people like me. I think we are not going to show the results, correct? Or you want to show them? Well, up to you.
Boy, put me on the spot right now. Sure, show them.
Okay. Take a quick look here. Pretty well satisfied. Probably wouldn't still be here otherwise, right? Pretty well satisfied with the morning speakers and with the afternoon sessions. Looks like you might have liked more opportunities for discussion. Could we have our screen? Thank you. Looks like you would have liked to have had a little more opportunities, some of you, for discussion, but you like the networking. You would like a little more. Looks like you'll be back next year, and you're satisfied with how things are going. And with that, we can turn the screen off and turn it back over to Katie.
Thank you, ma'am. Well, thank you all for sticking around all day. I know there was a lot of information that was thrown at you. I'm a little biased, but I had a great day. I learned a lot. Thank you to everyone who participated today. I should say first, I hope that you all leave today not only understanding a little more about what's going on with the Green Infrastructure Initiative in West Michigan, but as well as what's going on around the state and how what we're doing locally affects our region and affects the state. I hope you're leaving with more questions than you had when you came here, and I'm very happy to talk to anyone. If there's any way I can help you get some information that you wish you had a little more of, please give me a call. So before I send you on your way, I would like to thank folks who helped put this event together today. Thank you so much to the sponsors for making the event possible, to our speakers and contributors who shared their experiences with us, to Soji, to Steve Heacock, to Barbara Nelson-Jameson, and Tom Daniels, he's on a plane right now, or he's getting ready to be on a plane. To our breakout session leaders, Kendra Wills from MSU Extension, Denny Heffron of Heffron Farms, John Schultz, Ottawa County Parks, Tia Cavender and John Ebers from Metro Hospital. Thanks to Elaine Starrett-Isley and Johannes Hailu for their great examples of economic valuation modeling. Very interesting. Thanks so much to Ted Parsons, WIMS's executive assistant, for his tireless can-do attitude and professionalism, and for always being my cheerleader here. Sue Ann Clark and Maura Warren and everybody else at Progressive Administrative Resources who helped everything run smoothly behind the scenes. It was not their fault that things were running late. That was my fault today. I do apologize. To the Green Infrastructure Leadership Council members who always serve in a great advisory capacity, and I appreciate your leadership. To Greg Northrup, the president of West Michigan Strategic Alliance, for his leadership and support, and everyone else at WMSA. On behalf of the Alliance, the Leadership Council, and AIA Grand Valley, thank you all for coming. We hope to see you at the summit next year in 2008. So have a safe drive home.